Good afternoon again, everybody. This is still the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. I am Joe Benning, your chair. We have Senators Mazza from Grand Isle, Ingalls from Essex Orleans, McCormick from Windsor, Parent from Franklin County. We are here talking now about S71, a bill that was introduced by Senator Pearson, who has also joined us this afternoon. I have been told that Becky Wasserman is also on the schedule this afternoon. I don't know whether she's available or not. Senator Pearson, could you let me know, is she the actual drafts person on the bill?
Yes, she
Okay.
is.
Well, unless and until she shows up, we'll probably start off with you, Senator Pearson, to give us a rundown of why this bill is important, and then shift over to David and he'll tell us why it actually is important.
That's a good description of the flow here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Chris Pearson from Chittenden County. Okay, we'll get this the language right in front of you. The language is pretty straightforward, and I appreciate you taking up some time, and I think this is worth pursuing. I think the best way to describe the bill is to just tell you the trajectory, because I think it's sort of interesting. We, as you know, on capital projects and state construction projects, we pay workers, we're hinged to the so-called prevailing wage. And this is the basic premise that people who are working for the state itself as a contracting entity ought to be making sure that we are promoting wages, not depressing wages, right? We don't want to be an actor that is driving the economy down. We're quite the opposite. We want to drive money down into the pockets of workers. So when it comes to school construction, I was approached by folks who you may hear from that said, you know, we really should make sure that school construction honors this same contract that state workers, that people working on state projects do. And so I agreed to put it in the bill. When I talked to Becky Wasserman, both of us kind of were dancing around the question of is this actually a change? Prevailing wage has been very clearly hinged to capital projects, but the law talks about state funds. When state funds are used, then prevailing wage drives the agreements. And of course, our education fund is a state fund. The law doesn't say when it's through the capital bill. So actually, I think, and others have argued, that this is already the law, and we're kind of maybe never had this contested, and because we've basically had a bit of a freeze on school construction, it hasn't come up. But I think it's the right thing to do. I think we are likely to see, as we know, some pressure on school construction, and we ought to make sure that workers in those projects are paid a decent wage. And we ought to just make it clear that state funds, when state funds go to capital projects, it doesn't matter if it's a bonded project or what bill it comes through, that we are contributing to a general good pressure upward for the workers doing those jobs. And you can talk to others, experts that can tell you the percentage of construction projects that goes towards labor versus material. You know, labor actually is not the overwhelming driver of the cost. So anyway, this is mostly a clarification that some tell me, and Becky will maybe weigh in here, that it is already the law because our ed dollars go through our state dollars. But that's what we're after. It's a little piece of trying to boost wages and make sure the state itself is not contributing to income inequality. And I'd be glad if you guys could dig in and take a look and maybe advance this.
Chris, before I open it up to committee, tell me why this bill is in institutions. This is Title 16 we're talking about, which is the educational statute. I'm trying to figure out, since we haven't done school construction project through the capital bill. And well, ever since I've been associated with the committee, which I began in 2011,
Long time.
I think it's been a long time before that. This seems to me to be a policy decision, not a decision from a capital bill perspective.
I don't disagree with you, Mr. Chair. That's maybe a question for the Lieutenant Governor or for the Secretary of the Senate. Obviously, I had no bearing on where it would go. And I'm happy to work with you if you want to shift it over to economic development or a different committee. So I just don't know. But I guess prevailing wage as a policy, I believe did come. We made some changes to it, maybe 2016. And I thought my memory, I was in the other body at that point, was that it came through this committee, but I really don't know. It's kind of out of my pay grade.
I don't know who's got control of the screen. Can you scroll up a little bit? I'd like to see the beginning of the new language. Okay, right there. Up. Back down a little bit. Okay, right there. So this would be for each school district as well as each approved independent school.
Yeah, it applies where the ed fund is engaged.
Yeah, it seems to me all the more reason this ought to be either in ed or in economic development. Committee, I think I saw a hand up. Senator Mazza.
Yeah, well, we don't do school construction funding anymore. So how would we, what, we haven't done school construction in many years.
Yeah,
is
that
ahead.
a question for me, Senator?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. That we haven't done it in the way we used to do it through the capital bill, but schools in Vermont are, increasingly we're seeing Winooski, as an example, has got a construction project underway right now. We are seeing some demand on some construction. So it's not funded in the same way, but it is funded through the ed fund. That's where this clarification, I think, is appropriate.
But they're getting construction money from the ed fund?
Sure, it goes into the budget, and their debt financing goes against their per pupil funding. So it's all wrapped into the school funding, which is a statewide
But it's
fund.
also on local property taxes.
Well, of course, it is just the way, it's not distinct from the way we pay for teachers or the way
We used to give 20% of school construction funds over the years, and even higher at some points, but now we give zero. So I don't know what jurisdiction we would have.
Chris, the independent schools, are they funded for construction purposes through the ed bill?
My understanding, I'm no expert on school construction, but when schools take on some construction, whether they're public schools or independent schools that are supported through the ed fund, that bonding, if you bond for $30 million, that doesn't go into your annual spending, but your financing of that bond goes into your annual spending, just as if you hired another teacher or gave a raise to the principal. So the financing shows up in your per pupil spending, and therefore it impacts local property tax, it impacts the statewide property tax, it impacts the ed fund. That's my point. We have no quarrel that when the state is constructing, whether it's a highway or a new building, the prevailing wage applies. That is settled. That's historic. What is got some question, what this seeks to clarify, is that the same principle should apply for school construction because the money is coming through the state.
What's the school board association? What's their stand on this?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's additional questions along that line that tell me this bill belongs elsewhere. But committee members, I see Dick McCormick's got his hand up.
Yeah, Chairman, I need, again, being newly returned to the committee, and it's a much changed committee from last time I was on it. I just need a little education here. Is there any bonded any money derived from state bonds involved in school construction now? I don't know who I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that myself. I don't know if anybody else does.
Okay, because we would have jurisdiction if it involves bonded money, right? We're sort of the committee of jurisdiction over bond, but I haven't heard anything in the conversation about that.
That is true, but I'm not seeing this as limited to bonded money.
Okay, well, that's really what I'm asking.
Yeah, when I look at the number, for instance, the 200,000 triggering point, is that prior to the estimated cost, or does that estimate have to be made with the new wage applied as well? If an independent school came up with $200,001 for a capital construction project, but didn't want to pay the prevailing wage at the time, and some contractor said, okay, I'll do that. Are we forcing it to happen anyway as a prevailing wage? Chris?
I could be mistaken, but I believe this is meant to parallel the current law around prevailing wage for state construction. And that is the entire goal here is we can't, if it's funded out of the capital budget or the general fund, we treat workers very clearly under prevailing wage. And I believe the $200,000 is the trigger. A smaller contract doesn't trigger prevailing wage. So all we're trying to say here is school construction is the same. It's the same beast here. It's just a different fund, a different state fund.
Well, I know what your ultimate objective is, but if St. Johnsbury Academy or Linden Institute came up with a donation of some kind for, let's say they got a donation for 200,000 plus $1, and it was going to all go into a construction project, it seems to me you are now dictating to that private institute or independent institution that they must pay the prevailing wage. I think that's the intent of the bill. And I'm not sure that this committee is in the jurisdiction of getting the opposing sides of that conversation to come in and talk about something that's not bonded money. And that's, I guess, where I'm leaning towards trying to figure out who would actually have control of this conversation. Senator Parent.
Yeah, so Joe, I think why it could have got sent here, although I think Lieutenant Governor's had a rough day recommending bills. This is a third bill I've seen today, and they're all in the wrong committee, over two committees. But when I think actually when Senator Pierce and I were both in the House, it was the capital bill that carried the prevailing wage bill through. And so I don't know if that's why it ended up here or not. But when we looked at, I think this was like 2015, when this passed the other piece. The only other question I have too is, I guess I don't know how it works that well. When we give out grant money to municipalities to build certain projects, are they required to pay the prevailing wage? How do we handle it there as well? Or a TIF, because a TIF technically is using state resources to pay. So I just, are we providing consistency across the three? Either way, if this bill stays here, I'm not necessarily opposed to where I think Chris is trying to go with this. I think we all have a lot of questions, and I guess we probably should get to.
I think the reason it was sent here is I don't think it's the Lieutenant Governor's fault, because John Bloomer usually makes these distinctions where they go. The fact, I think, that we used to do school construction funding from the capital bill.
Right.
We no longer do that. That's my only question. For years and years and years, we used to spend millions of dollars on school construction. We stopped that many years ago. So we have no money we give out at all from the capital bill. That That's my only, that's the question I have. That's it.
Yeah, and on top of that, this language talks about money for projects that have nothing to do with state bonding, as I see it. The only thing that is required in the case that I gave is simply that they've come up with a project that's going to cost more than $200,000. And now this language would tell them they have to pay the contractor at a prevailing wage. I don't want to get into a dispute about whether that should or shouldn't happen. It's just that it's outside of the jurisdiction of this committee as I would normally see it to be. Well, Senator McCormick.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. There is a chairs meeting this afternoon, right?
That there is.
I would hope, because we've had two bills, both of which for one, I think both the bill on the probation officers being armed and now on prevailing wage, I think those bills ought to pass. If I've been raising jurisdiction issues, it's not as a means of stopping them. It's that I want to make sure we do it right. I would hope that on behalf of the committee, you could get this settled if all goes well this afternoon.
Well,
As
I'll
to
tell you what
committees
happened.
should take it.
Yeah, when we took a break, I emailed both Jeanette White and Dick Steers on the previous bill, because I think one of them should have that bill in their jurisdiction. And I'm asking for a response. Probably what I would do with this when we get done here, and I'm willing to listen to anybody else that may be on the line that's come here today to talk to us. But my intent would be to let both Mike Sirotkin and Brian Campion know that this bill is out there. And it seems to me it's not within our jurisdiction, that one of them ought to be looking into it, and do they want it? That's my intent as I'm sitting here thinking about it right now.
And I would hope wherever it ends up, that would happen quickly, because I can't believe I'm going to say what I'm about to say, but crossover is upon us. We're getting very close to crossover.
Yeah.
In terms of how many business days we have left.
It's a 2-year session, Dick.
Well, in
What's that?
fairness,
But on these bills, it's not.
yeah, but in fairness to us, Dick, these two bills came to us just at the end of last week.
Yeah.
So it's not like we've been sitting on them for any length of time. As soon as they came in, I had them scheduled.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Chair.
Sure. David, you're here as well. You wanted to say something and weigh in?
Sure. David Mickenberg here on behalf of the Vermont Building Construction Trades Council. I won't go through my remarks given the conversation about committee jurisdiction. I think Senator Mazza raised a good point about school construction being funded through the capital bill. And it was in 2000, I believe, 16, in which the prevailing wage issue, I got to work with Senator Flory and Senator Mazza, Kathy Lamberton, and others to come up with a compromise on prevailing wage that is now the policy for the state. This bill would extend that policy, and I'm happy to have the policy discussion in whatever committee is the appropriate committee. So I don't want to, I know you all have had a busy day. I don't want to take too much of your time getting into the merits of the bill, given we have these jurisdictional issues. I'm pleased to hear some of the positive comments from members of the committee about the underlying bill, and I appreciate that. So unless you want me to get into the merits, and I don't know that it makes sense to.
No, I think, David, that the discussion has me wanting to get off this committee meeting as soon as possible and write letters to both of the chairs of the other committees, because at 4 o'clock we have a chairs committee meeting, and hopefully they'll see those messages before that meeting. But in the event one of them is willing to take the bill on, it would be my intention to get on the floor tomorrow and ask to have institutions relieved of the bill, and that it be transferred to committee A or B.
Great. That sounds good. Thanks, Senator.
Anybody else want to say anything here this afternoon? If not, Chris, David, thank you for coming along.
Thanks for the time.
Committee, that was all that I had scheduled. I'm still surprised to see Vince is on the screen and not responding, but We could probably let him just hang out there in YouTube land all by himself. That would be kind of funny.
Just for the record, the reason we have this, the bill on corrections officers is because Senator Luzzi was chair and brought it in. It did.
Senator Luzzi actually was also in 1996 the chair of institutions that did the original prevailing wage bill as well.
Right. That's right. So I just for the record, that's how we got in there. As we know, it was,
What year was that?
I believe 1996. but-
Oh, 96. Okay.
Yeah.
Corey, were you born then?
I was starting first grade that year.
Okay. All right.